Osama bin Laden. He was born into wealth and privilege in Saudi Arabia, far from the image he would later become known for. His life took a sharp turn during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, where he joined and funded fighters resisting the occupation. That experience reshaped his worldview, turning him toward a belief that global powers were interfering in regions he considered sacred. Over time, he formed Al-Qaeda, an organization built on coordination and long-term planning rather than isolated acts. The attacks on U.S. embassies in 1998 and the events of September 11, 2001 brought his name to the forefront of global attention. From that moment, he became the most wanted man in the world. For nearly a decade, he avoided capture, moving between safe locations while intelligence agencies pieced together fragments of information. His story ended in 2011 when U.S. forces located him in Pakistan and carried out a targeted raid. His death marked the end of a long manhunt, though the network he helped create continued beyond him. Pablo Escobar. He began his life in Colombia with small-scale crime, dealing in stolen goods and contraband. What set him apart was his ability to recognize opportunity in the growing cocaine trade of the 1970s. He expanded quickly, building routes that connected producers in South America to consumers across the globe. At the height of his power, he controlled a massive share of the cocaine entering the United States. His wealth allowed him to influence politics, law enforcement, and entire communities. But his power relied heavily on violence. When faced with opposition, he responded with bombings, assassinations, and intimidation on a national scale. Cities became battlegrounds as the government attempted to regain control. His ability to evade capture only added to his reputation. Eventually, after years on the run, authorities tracked him down in 1993. He was killed while attempting to escape, ending a pursuit that had turned into a defining conflict for the country. Al Capone. He rose to prominence during a time when alcohol was illegal but widely consumed. Starting from modest beginnings, he built a network that controlled bootlegging, gambling, and other illegal operations in Chicago. He presented himself as a businessman, often maintaining a public image that masked the extent of his activities. Violence was part of his system, used strategically to maintain control and eliminate competition. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre became one of the most well-known examples of his methods, drawing national attention. Despite his reputation, law enforcement struggled to connect him directly to major crimes. Instead, they focused on financial evidence, building a case around unpaid taxes. In 1931, he was convicted and sent to prison. His downfall showed that even the most powerful figures could be brought down through careful investigation rather than direct confrontation. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. He grew up in a rural part of Mexico where opportunities were limited and the drug trade was already present. He entered that world early, rising through the ranks by combining strategy with technical innovation. He became known for building tunnels that allowed drugs to move across borders without detection, changing how trafficking operations were carried out. As leader of the Sinaloa cartel, he oversaw a network that stretched across continents. His reputation grew not only from his success, but from his ability to escape capture. He broke out of prison multiple times, each escape increasing his notoriety and putting pressure on authorities. His final capture in 2016 ended years of pursuit. He was later extradited to the United States, where he remains imprisoned in conditions designed to prevent any possibility of escape. Dr. Joseph Mengele. He was a trained physician who used his position during the Second World War in ways that violated every ethical boundary. At Auschwitz, he had the authority to decide who would live and who would be sent to their deaths. Beyond that, he conducted experiments on prisoners, particularly focusing on twins and genetic traits. These experiments were carried out without consent and often resulted in suffering or death. As the war came to an end, he managed to escape, avoiding immediate capture. He moved through different countries in South America, living under false identities while investigators searched for him. For decades, he remained one of the most wanted individuals connected to the war. He died in 1979, but his identity was not confirmed until years later. His case became a symbol of how some individuals were able to avoid justice despite the scale of their actions. John Dillinger. He became active during the Great Depression, a time when many people were struggling financially. His bank robberies were carried out with speed and precision, often leaving authorities unprepared. Unlike other criminals, he gained a level of public support as some saw him as someone challenging institutions that were widely distrusted. His escapes added to his reputation, making him appear almost untouchable. Law enforcement began to adapt, forming more coordinated efforts to track him down. His actions played a role in shaping modern federal policing. In 1934, he was located outside a theater in Chicago and shot by agents. His story became part of American folklore, showing how quickly a criminal figure can become a legend. Ted Bundy. He appeared outwardly normal, which made his actions difficult to detect. Across multiple states, a series of disappearances began to form a pattern that investigators struggled to connect. Bundy used manipulation and deception, often gaining the trust of his victims before acting. His ability to move between locations made the investigation more complex. Even after being arrested, he escaped custody, extending the timeline of his crimes. His eventual capture led to a highly publicized trial where forensic evidence played a key role. His case changed how similar crimes were investigated, contributing to the development of profiling and cross-state cooperation. His story remains one of the most studied examples of its kind. D.B. Cooper. He remains one of the few individuals on this list whose fate is still unknown. Boarding a commercial flight under a false name, he carried out a hijacking with calm precision. He demanded money and parachutes, and after receiving them, he released the passengers. Once the plane was back in the air, he jumped into the night over a remote area. Despite an extensive search, no clear trace of him was ever found. Years later, some of the ransom money was discovered, but it only deepened the mystery. His case continued for decades without resolution. Unlike others who were eventually captured or killed, he disappeared completely. His story stands as one of the most unusual manhunts in history, defined not by its conclusion, but by its unanswered questions. Whitey Bulger. He grew up in South Boston and built his reputation within a tightly knit community where loyalty and silence were essential. Over time, he became the leader of the Winter Hill Gang, controlling large parts of the city's criminal activity. What made him especially difficult to stop was his secret relationship with the FBI, where he acted as an informant while continuing his own operations. This dual role allowed him to eliminate rivals and avoid consequences for years. When the truth began to surface, he disappeared just before being arrested. For over a decade, he lived under the radar, becoming one of the most wanted fugitives in the United States. He was eventually found living quietly in California and arrested in 2011, bringing an end to a long and complicated manhunt. Griselda Blanco. She built her power in the cocaine trade during a time when the industry was expanding rapidly. Starting in Colombia and later moving to the United States, she played a major role in establishing trafficking routes into cities like Miami. Her approach was defined by control and intimidation, often using violence to secure her position. She became known for introducing new methods of carrying out targeted attacks, which increased both her influence and her notoriety. Law enforcement agencies spent years trying to locate her as she moved frequently and changed her identity. She was eventually arrested in California in 1985 after a long investigation. Her story stands out as an example of how influence in organized crime was not limited by background, but shaped by strategy and control. Carlos the Jackal. He was born Ilich Ramirez Sanchez and became involved in international political movements at a young age. His activities were not tied to one country, making him difficult to track and classify. He gained global attention after leading a high-profile hostage situation involving oil ministers in Vienna. From that point on, he became one of the most wanted figures connected to international terrorism. For years, he moved between countries, often protected by shifting political alliances. His ability to adapt allowed him to remain active long after others had been captured. Eventually, changing global conditions reduced his safe spaces. In 1994, he was captured in Sudan and transferred to France, ending a long period of pursuit that had stretched across continents. Adolf Eichmann. He operated not on the battlefield, but within the administrative structure of Nazi Germany. His role focused on organizing the transportation of millions of people to concentration and extermination camps. He approached his work with efficiency, treating it as a logistical challenge rather than a moral one. After the war, he managed to escape Europe and lived under a false identity in Argentina. For years, his location remained unknown, making him one of the most wanted figures connected to the war. In 1960, Israeli agents located and captured him in a covert operation, bringing him to Israel for trial. His case drew global attention as it revealed the scale and organization behind the system he had helped manage. His capture demonstrated that even years later, efforts to find and hold individuals accountable could continue. If you made it this far, drop a comment below and let us know which wanted person you want us to cover next. Subscribe so you never miss an upload. There is a lot more where this came from.